Starting a business? Choosing the right structure is one of the first decisions you'll make. Get it wrong and you could lose your house in a lawsuit, pay thousands more in taxes than you need to, and if you're starting a business from outside the US, you could get completely locked out of US banks and payment processors. Get it right? You protect everything you own, keep more of what you earn, and if you're a non-US resident breaking into the US market, you unlock access to US bank accounts, Stripe, PayPal, Shopify. The first step is answering the question, do you actually need an LLC? The truth is, some people actually waste money forming LLCs they don't need. They can be expensive to form and maintain. Yes, I'm talking about you, California, with your $800 a year fees. Other people skip it when it's absolutely critical and pay the price later. In the next 5 minutes, I'll show you exactly what an LLC is, who should seriously consider having one, and who should absolutely not skip it. First, what is an LLC? It stands for Limited Liability Company. It takes the best features of a corporation, leaves out the downsides, and combines it with the tax advantages and simplicity of a sole proprietorship. A corporation is a legal entity separate from you that protects your personal assets from business debts and lawsuits. If someone sues the business, they generally can't touch your house, car, or savings. The downside of a corporation? More complexities in the maintenance and the problem of double taxation. The corporate profits are taxed first, and then any dividends the shareholders take are also taxed. A sole proprietor, on the other hand, is self-employed with no corporate paperwork and simple taxation. Profits flow through to your personal tax return, but there's zero liability protection. If someone sues your business, they can come after everything you own. An LLC gives you the best of both. Liability protection like a corporation and pass-through taxation like a sole proprietorship. The formation, compliance, and paperwork is easier and less expensive than a corporation too. No board meetings or extensive formalities. An LLC can even be flexible in how it's taxed and managed. Sounds pretty great, right? So everybody should have an LLC. Actually, no. Let's start with who can skip the LLC. Have a casual side hustle, making a few $100 a month selling on Etsy, or doing occasional freelance work? An LLC is probably overkill. You're fine as a sole proprietor. Just starting out and not sure if your business will work? You're probably okay starting as a sole proprietor until you start earning consistent income. If you're doing something very low risk, fairly low income, working from home, no employees, minimal liability exposure, making under $10,000, you can probably wait. So what's the downside of an LLC if you form one and you don't need it? Cost is the main downside. Some states can be expensive to form and to maintain yearly. For example, California, fairly cheap to form, but there's an $800 franchise fee that's due even if your LLC doesn't make revenue. So who should form an LLC? 1, e-commerce sellers, especially if you're selling something with any liability risk. Selling on Amazon, Shopify, Etsy. Once you're earning consistent income, product liability becomes a real concern. An LLC protects your personal assets if someone becomes injured with something that you sell. Number 2, service providers. Coaches, consultants, freelancers, designers. An LLC shields you from client lawsuits and gives you a professional look. Number 3, truckers and owner-operators. Operating heavy vehicles, the liability risk is massive. An LLC is basically standard in this industry. 4, rental property owners. Many owners put each rental property in its separate LLC. That way, if a tenant sues you for something that happened on one property, they can't touch the other properties. 5, contractors and tradespeople. Working on client property creates constant liability issues. Construction defects, property damage, injuries, and LLC protects you. Number 6, anyone with employees. Once you start having employees, liability risk increases. Privacy matters too. With an LLC, you can use your business address rather than your home address for legal documents, business cards, websites. Want to build business credit or apply for a business loan? Having an LLC makes it easier to establish that credibility with lenders. And what about high-earning 1099 independent contractors? There are tax strategies involving LLCs that can dramatically decrease your self-employment taxes. That's something to talk to a tax professional about, something worth looking into. So the pattern is, if you're making significant money, have any liability risk, have personal assets that you want to protect, or if you want the privacy, having an LLC makes sense. However, if you are a non-US resident trying to do business in the US, an LLC is essential, not optional. And the reason comes down to getting paid. To sell in the US or have US clients, you need US banking and payment processing. If you're not a US citizen or resident, it is very hard to get a business bank account as a sole proprietor. Banks require a social security number, which you can't get unless you are a citizen or a resident. The solution? Form an LLC, get a tax number called an EIN from the IRS, and that is your first step to going to open a US bank account. Payment processors like Stripe, PayPal, and Square all require a US business account and a legitimate US business presence. Without an LLC, you can't get that. What about Amazon sellers? Amazon does not require an LLC to do business on its platform, but without a business bank account, it's difficult to get approved for payouts, and you may be dealing with very high currency conversion fees. But unfortunately, just having an LLC and an EIN does not guarantee a smooth setup of this business banking infrastructure. Here's something really important and fairly new. Banks and payment processors are no longer accepting virtual addresses, mail forwarding services, PO boxes that used to work for non-residents. They want to see a real physical business location, not a virtual address and not a PO box. This is where Micro Office Solutions comes in. We are building micro offices in Wyoming, affordable physical office spaces that come with a lease and strengthen your banking applications. We're building this in Wyoming because Wyoming is the most LLC-friendly state. Subscribe so you don't miss the next video explaining who should get a Wyoming LLC and who probably shouldn't. But the bottom line for foreign entrepreneurs, an LLC isn't a nice to have, it's essential. It's your key to accessing the US market. For those already in the States, an LLC takes an hour or two of paperwork and a few $100s to set up and maintain. For most serious business owners, that's a small price to pay for protecting everything you've built. So click the link below to find out how Micro Office Solutions can help you with LLC formation and a micro office in Wyoming. We're starting our founding client list, ready to open Q1 2026.